we will find a way to fit this into the patterns we already have, even though we think it's flipping everything up right now.
I'm gonna chill down with techniques from the where CTOs share the tales and the comments. From start of two big names and the visions unfold. How many CTOs will share their stories untold?
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast. My name's Brad Hefta-Gaub, and my trusty co-host is...
Scott Porad. How are you, my trusty co-host?
I am doing fantastic. How you doing?
I'm doing good as well. We have an occasion to celebrate.
I was going to say, did you know what today, the day that we're recording this podcast, is?
It is our birthday.
It's our birthday. It's
Our
the pod,
our podcast birthday.
our podcast birthday. It was exactly a year ago today, on
Happy birthday to us.
February 18th, 2025, that we released the first episode of this little shindig we call a podcast.
Yeah. Been fun.
It's been fun, hasn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. What's happened in the last year?
What so much has happened in the last year, hasn't it?
I don't know. It hasn't been a lot. I can only think of one thing that's happened in the last
One
year.
thing that's happened.
Well, let's just recap it. We interviewed some people
Yes,
because we had some vexing questions
Yes.
of engineering management.
yes. Like the ball of mud.
I came into this podcast, that was the most pressing thing on my mind was, what do we do about some of these problems like tech debt and
Yeah.
balls of mud, things like that?
Yeah.
And to be truthful, what I learned is I don't think anybody knows.
Nobody knows how to solve that problem.
I mean, we didn't interview everybody,
Yeah.
but we interviewed some smart people and talked to some smart people. And it seems like, I guess there's only one answer, which is just you put your head down and go to work and just refactor the stuff. There's no real secret to it.
Yeah, I think that like that's what I feel like I kind of take away from all the conversations we had in that regard is it's like lots of people have advice on how not to get to the ball of mud,
Yeah.
right? There's nobody that has any advice on what to do if you unfortunately already have the ball of mud.
Yeah. Now, you know that I'm in the business right now of trying to untangle a ball of mud.
Yeah.
And I have observed maybe that there is a role or a function that we don't have in our industry that we need.
Oh, tell me more.
I'll just call it product manager. I'm not sure it's really product manager. So, if you have a bunch of features you want to add to your product, you have product managers who go out there and interview the customers and the stakeholders and try to figure out how to build it and work with designers and collaborate with engineers. And ultimately, in theory, it ends up in a spec and an engineer goes and builds it, right? When you want to say refactor a system because it's, doesn't work well or brittle or whatever, that whole part, that important work of like, okay, what exactly are the problems? What are the possible solutions? Let's consider them, et cetera, et cetera. The engineers just kind of do it, or the engineering managers or whomever. People just kind of do it.
Yeah.
But it takes time and energy, and we might be better at unwinding these balls of mud if we had people who specialized in that.
Yeah.
I suppose it could be architects, architect types, right? But there's also, product managers bring with them sort of at least in our industry, sort of a project management skill set also to sort of
Yeah.
shepherd something along. And that's not something that often our engineering architect types have.
I'm getting two strong reactions from what you're saying here.
Tingly? You're getting tingly?
Yeah, I'm getting some tingling. So the first one is we just had one of our posts that are so on our social media literally today just kind of went a little viral, and it was this post where you and I, it was from a couple episodes ago, where we were talking about interviewing for engineers in the age of AI. And
Yeah.
and the clip was basically kind of you and I talking about how like really being able to untangle vague business problems and then kind of demonstrating your ability as an engineer to understand a vague business problem and then turn it into actionable steps. That was kind of
Yeah.
what you and I were talking about in that clip. And there was it went viral with a couple of different people basically kind of reacting with, well, my product managers can't even do that. They can't even untangle vague business problems.
Yeah.
And so I'm just getting this tingling feeling about you kind of talking about like how there's this gap there that like kind of really being good at understanding business problems and being able to kind of like capture them. And in my own like fractional CTO experience, like I run into this all the time, right? Like I got multiple clients that I've either, engaged with or talked to where their problems are almost always like, oh, I have the founder visionary CEO. It's like, I have a vision for what I want, but then they struggle at kind of like putting it down on paper. And then if you can't put it down on paper in some form that then can be digested by engineers, then of course what the engineers are going to build is you're not going to be happy with it. You're going to be dissatisfied. And so like, I think there's that's a real thing.
I want to go into that, but I want to clarify something I said, which is, to me, it's actually more on the things that don't have a business, well, they have business impact. Let me give a concrete example. This is the best one I can think of at the moment. We are currently refactoring our authentication system.
Yep.
Classic, company that's 15 years old. We have a homegrown authentication system. Now there are off-the-shelf services we can use, and we're going to switch, right? And so to get from A to B, there are a number of steps you got to go through to get there. We have 4 different customer types at TaskRabbit. So we have to think about each of their use cases. We have to build it with the new system. We have to migrate people over, so on and so forth. But when we're done, nothing will really be different than what we have
Yeah.
now, right?
Yeah.
To the user, it'll appear a little bit different because it's gonna, but like conceptually, like it's still.
In fact, if it acts different, it almost is a problem.
That's right.
You
That's
probably
right.
broke something if it acts different.
Yeah, it's still going to be, username, password, text message with a code kind of situation, right? So, but underneath the covers, it's going to be more flexible. So, and then what I was observing today, I was looking at this plan and I noticed some features creeped in there. Oh, we want to add social login, we want to add this and that other thing. But the main point is, forget the stuff that creeped in there. Just going and saying, well, wait a second, what is all the stuff that our auth system does now? What are the requirements? Figuring that out and then making the plan forward and then breaking that into milestones and deliverables. That's real work,
Yeah.
and it's a soft skill. It's not well, it requires some technical skill, but it also requires the skill of really being able to project manage and to some degree product manage. So
I will say this, the second tingly feeling that I had that I mentioned I had multiple is I remember, and our producer can find and link to the episode where we talked about this, but
mhm,
I remember us having this conversation where one of the things I said to you was, I think that the challenge of the ball of mud is so many people don't know all the functionality that's in the ball of mud. And
yes,
and so like that's one of the reasons we're all afraid to sort of refactor is we're afraid that we're going to miss out on something that we didn't realize was a feature that was in there.
that's right.
And potentially there are a bunch of features that are in there that literally nobody uses and don't matter anymore, but you kind of get this paralysis where you don't know, or you don't know if people are using it, or worse, you don't even know that it exists, and so you're just afraid of the stuff, the unknown that is in there that's 10 years old, that how could nobody remembers it, but somebody's surely using it.
To add on to that, here's a way that we do ourselves a disservice. As engineers, we say, oh, authentication sucks.
Right.
It's terrible to work with. Okay, what sucks about it? Oh, it's garbage.
Right.
Okay. What specifically about it is garbage? Well, it doesn't follow any standards. Oh, okay, now we're cooking with gas, right? So I think we do ourselves a disservice of engineers of not being actually descriptive of the real problems, right? And what I've observed is often when you get to the real problems, when you get from it sucks to it's not standards based, then you can get into, oh, now we can solve this. Right now we
Yeah.
know we can get to a solution for this because we can, we need a standards based thing. Okay, let's go do that.
Yeah, totally.
I want to go back to what you were saying about that thing that went viral. I played for the first time yesterday with something that GitHub has published called Spec Kit.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
played with Spec Kit?
Yeah, it's one of the SDD things out there, the software or spec-driven development things out there.
Yeah.
Spec Kit's
It's
one
one
of
of
them.
the SDD things out there.
Yeah.
Essentially, if I was to interpret what it's doing, it is.
Hold on a second, wait a second.
helping-
I just want to make sure we're clear. We're 15 minutes into the conversation, and
Yeah.
we're about to start talking about
The second theme from this year. The second theme from this year for me, Brad, I think you were ahead of me on this, is I would say a year ago, February, whatever, a year ago, I was still in the this AI is interesting. Let's see what it does. I don't know. Might, it's unclear how much of an impact it's going to have.
Yeah.
It'll have some. I mean, it'll definitely make a difference, but like
Yeah.
how much? And I think I have come to now, February later. Oh boy, not sure we're gonna have. I'm not sure this industry is going to be here. It'll be here, but like I'm not sure what it's going to look like in
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah.
Like this is. I'm going to use two words, kind of with a slash. Crazy cool.
Yeah.
It's wild what's happening out there right now. That's where I've come to.
But you know what's interesting is we had, remember, like in one of our early episodes, we had Michael Natkin on.
Yeah,
And what he basically described, and he had a blog post that he wrote that kind of went like, this was like more than a year ago. He had this blog post that kind of went a little viral about how he was using prompting. And what he was doing was now is what people call SDD. But he didn't call it
yeah.
that, right? But he basically had, he had this template of like, hey, I'm building this, building the following thing. Here's the things. Create for me a task list. In the task list, make sure that you have clear acceptance criteria for each task. And so this was a set of these were essentially, he had figured this out. I don't think he was unique in this, but he'd kind of figured out this model of like overly prescript make sure that before the agents try to write any code at all, they're really focused on a high quality spec of what success looks like and what the acceptance criteria are.
Well, it goes right back to that comment that you were saying on that post. Even the product managers don't do this.
Yeah.
But when the robots are not there in the room with you or on Slack with you and can't ask you, what did you mean by this? Or use their judgment to say, oh, I think I knew what he meant by date picker,
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly.
I'll just grab this date picker library. You have to be very specific.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. I've seen a couple of posts recently. So one, SDD is obviously the big trend lately. And what I think is interesting is like as we look back on the year, I think that the themes around how do you use AI effectively and the speed with which the teams that are using it effectively are starting to get results is very much driving around this notion of call it SDD or call it like plan mode or call it like clear outcome based instructions to the agent. That's really what this is about.
Mhm.
And, as I have said, I'm a big believer in, have like I think the challenges of the teams that are going to struggle with AI or the ones that are going to succeed with AI are really going to be the ones that succeed are going to be the ones that have infrastructure that would allow human developers to write 3,000 lines of new code every day, right? Like, and if
Mhm.
you can't handle a human developer writing, 10 300-line pull requests a day, then you're not going to be able to handle what true agentic programming is capable of doing.
Yeah, we're going to see another fork in the road too, though. I'm seeing it already, which is the work that our team is doing, where it's essentially Greenfield, just tremendous AI productivity.
Yeah.
And then the work that's the Brownfield work, where they're having to go into the existing system. We haven't got there yet. Some of our people right now are working on trying to create the context and rules for our existing environment. Can we extract from the existing system what
Hmm.
these things are? But that's going to be a real K shape also, to
Yeah.
use your expression, which is company. It's actually I wonder if it's going to change this dynamic. So I've been asked so many times in my career, when things take too long, would it be better to start from scratch? And the
I
answer
think
is
that
always no.
that answer up till now has been no. The answer
Yeah,
going forward may become yes. So
maybe come yes.
yeah, so again, like if we look back on the last year of this podcast, like ball of mud, technical debt, human systems problems, like we talked a lot about that. And
Mhm.
then we've talked about it in the context of this radical transformation with AI.
Yeah, I would say the thing that has finally become clear to me in the last year is it is going to completely transform this industry.
Yeah.
Now, here's something interesting. I've worked in a bunch of startups, Brad, and I've worked I've always worked in startups. I'm not at a startup right now, but I've mostly worked in startups in my career. And usually, when you're doing a startup-y type of thing, it's something which is new, right? Um, I was early working on gig economy. I was early working on social media, user-generated content. I was early in e-commerce, all those kinds of things. And at the time you're doing it, you think it's very novel. But what happens over time, and I've seen this happen over and over again, is each of these things starts to get fit into an existing pattern, right? And it turns out, oh, they're not all that, we thought they were special, but it turns out they're not all that different from a bunch of other things that happened before, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, a gig economy marketplace, it's still a marketplace. It's still essentially like commerce on one end and fulfillment on the other end, right?
Yep.
User generated content, social media. It's basically just an advertising business. You're selling impressions and engagement, things like that, right?
Yeah.
And so the thought that comes to my mind lately is we think our industry is being transformed, but is it really? Or is it all, are we going to look back and find a way to fit this into all the
Right.
patterns and practices? Maybe, well, this is what you were touching on a minute ago with the 3,000 lines of code. Are we going to say, no, it's not that different. We just need to fit it into all the things that we've organically learned as an industry. I mean, here's what I'm going to get at. Okay, we're talking about the year in review. I'm going to talk about the year ahead for a second. Here's what we're going to learn over the next year. This is my prediction. A
Yeah.
prediction show. My prediction is in a year from now, it will make a big difference, but we will learn, it's still going to fit into our industry, right? All the things that we've organically learned over the last 75 years, not you and me 75 years, but as an industry 75 years. This isn't something different. It's just the next version of it. And it's probably a good frame for people to be thinking about it. You talked about it in terms of the engineer who wrote 3,000 lines of code, or I think, were we talking about ALDC recently?
Oh, we haven't talked about that yet.
We haven't talked about that yet. We talked about that on a future
Yeah,
podcast.
we're going to talk about that on a future podcast.
And
We'll have to hold off on that.
teaser for everybody, prediction. This year, there will be a thing called ALDC out there in the world. So my point is, we will find a way to fit this into the patterns we already have.
Yeah.
Even though we think it's flipping everything up right now.
Yeah, totally. And you know what's interesting is, so I literally just got forwarded a new YouTube video for I don't know if you ever watch Nate Jones. He's a actually Seattle guy, and he does like AI news and kind of like the latest in AI coding. And his podcast from today that came out just today was his video was about like the 5 levels of using AI in coding, and
Mm,
he kind of talks about like the notion of like level one is just like, fancy autocomplete, right? And then level two is much more like you're kind of giving more, almost like full tasks and letting it write some code. Level three is treating it like a junior engineer, and you're kind of managing it. Level four kind of goes up from that. Um, but then and so I think that like where I'm seeing like, and basically this guy's making the case that like most developers aren't getting past level two, right? The teams that are seeing high performance, they're more at level three. But there's very few, there's just a couple um, firms out there that are operating at what he describes level five, which is lights out software development factory, where the humans are only giving specifications and verifying results. And they're not
mhm,
writing the code, and they're not reviewing the code, and they're not, and they and those that notion of that lights out software factory, that works only if the owners of the factory, okay, the directors of the factory have a clear understanding of what a software factory looks like, right?
mhm,
And so to your point, like I think you're right. I think that what we'll see is, this is kind of what I've been talking about, this K-shaped economy. Like the people that really understand how to make a software factory will be able
mhm.
to have a software factory that is lights out, operated by robots, and a handful, very small number, less than three or less managers. But it will work only in the context that those three managers really do understand what it means to have a software factory. And had they had 1,000 human beings working for them, they would have to solve the problems of how do you have a software factory with 1,000 engineers writing code 24/7 around the clock?
First of all, I love that expression, lights out software factory. That's cool. Okay, so here's a question I have about that. If you had 1,000 humans, there would be some sort of enterprise architecture design function which said, okay, hey, you're going to work on this piece of the system and you're going to work on this piece of the system. And here's how all the pieces of the system are going to work together to contribute to this whole overall thing. In the lights out software factory, does that function exist or do we just let the robots figure out the whole thing?
That's a great question, and I haven't watched the whole video yet because I was watching it right before we started this call.
Okay, I'm
Um,
gonna I'm gonna
I
propose an answer to that.
yeah, I would love to hear what you think the answer to that question is.
If you want a ball of mud, then you let the robots do it. Think of it. If you had 1,000 engineers and no overall architecture and just said, here's your code base, go build this thing, you'd end up with a ball of mud. And if you said, okay, hey, well, we're going to build some sort of distributed service oriented kind of thing, and okay, you 20 agents over here, I want you to go build this piece, and you're going to talk to these other parts. Here's how you're going to communicate to these other parts. And so there does need to be some layer on top. Now, it might still be a human instructing an AI to design that layer,
Yeah.
but I think there is going to be layer or layers of those atop those 1,000 robots so that you don't end up with a giant ball of mud.
I think I agree with half of what you're saying and disagree with the other half. So
Okay.
the part that I agree with is that if you don't have a clear architecture, then you're going to end up with a ball of mud. Like that feels like I feel like it'd be hard for anybody to argue at that point, right? You and I kind of played around with kind of dabbling around that when a couple episodes ago, we talked about the question of like, does it matter if it's a ball of mud if the agents are able to write the code and understand it? Does it matter, right? And I kind of said, well, it still definitely matters because the humans need to read it, right? So
Mhm.
I'm now taking the stance that, well, if level 5 lights out software factory doesn't have humans reading the code anymore, then okay, does the ball of mud matter? I think the ball of mud still matters. I think you cannot, you don't want a ball of mud. If your factory is producing ball of mud, I think that's a bad thing. So I agree with that statement. You need architecture to not have a ball of mud. The part that I maybe disagree with you is, and maybe you won't argue with me too much on this because you did hint at maybe the architecture is developed by the AI with the guidance of the humans.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I think the answer is. The answer here is that you need to make sure your specification truly encompasses everything that matters for your software to come out the other end to match your business needs.
Hmm.
And so a good example of this would be if you fail to include in your specification the scale and the latency and you know, if you don't say scale and latency in your specification, then the AI will not bother to make it scalable with low latency,
Right. Right.
right? And
Yeah.
and by the way, as we kind of look back on the year in review, right? We had a great conversation with Greg Conklin where he was talking about like his experiences at large scale companies and how if he had it all to do over again, like what are the things that he would want to make sure he did in the early days of a venture?
Mm.
And one of those things that he called out on was make sure you're really clear with your engineering team, whether it's the robots or the humans, make sure you're really clear about what your non-negotiables are. And he gave the
Hmm.
example of like, I think this was when he was at Groupon or something like that, where kind of they had some kind of a performance. They were dealing with some performance problem, and like the senior architects were like, "Well, wait a second. If I'd known that like latency was a hard requirement, I would never have designed it this way,
Right. Right.
right? I didn't know that was one of the requirements,
Well, I think what I take from that is there is always a design function and an implementation function, right?
Mhm.
And often that happens in the same brain.
Mhm.
But as you get more and more coders, whether they're human coders or robot coders working on it, you still have to have both of those functions. And I think where you end up with the ball of mud is largely when you don't have a design function or when your design function is weak.
Or if I agree with that. And I would add to that a variant of your design function is weak is um, it's underspecified, right?
Yeah.
And if it's underspecified, then that means the engineer has to fill in the underspecified components. And if that is a human engineer filling in the underspecified components, then maybe they're going to make pattern choices that result in a ball of mud. If it's a robot that's filling in the underspecified components, we get to blame it for hallucinating, when in fact it was just filling in the underspecified components.
I've hallucinated before too.
Yeah,
Okay, so you're actually giving me, I just had an insight that I never quite had before. And maybe that's because I'm not that bright, but you
that's not
talked
like
about how balls of mud come when things are underspecified. And another reason balls of mud come is when there is time pressure for engineers and they choose to take anti-patterns in order to get it done. In a world where effectively the time to produce code becomes zero or something approaching it,
because we have a lights out software factory.
yeah, there is a project happening at our work right now, which I have not validated this yet, but an engineer using spec-driven development says he did a thing that was scheduled to take 4 months in 3 days.
Yeah.
And he was about to hand it off to some other people. And he was like, he said, I'm not going to do that. Actually, it only took 3 days. I'm going to start over and go sit down and pair with those people. And we can all do it together. Because
Yeah.
3 days is basically, it's going to take us 6 days now. It's still
Totally.
whatever,
I think
15 weeks faster than we thought.
By the way, kudos to that. That sounds like a fantastic idea. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, the benefit of not just shipping the 3 days, but then using that as the pair programming learning experience for the people that
Mhm.
would have tried to do it in 4 months. Whew, man,
Yeah.
that's gold.
And I believe he spent 2 of those 3 days getting the spec right.
Of course.
Interacting, using Spec Kit, interacting with it to define that. So my point is, if the cost of code becomes basically zero, if suddenly the anti-pattern of I was being pushed to get this done faster, so I hacked it together, and now I've got, say, dependencies between two parts of my systems that shouldn't exist any longer, that goes away.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. When we think about tech debt and balls of mud, one potentially something we get from AI is one of the biggest problems we face as an engineering industry goes away. The pressure. I mean, there's still going to be impatience and people want to get stuff done faster. I'm sure 3 days wasn't fast enough for the stakeholder. But the fact is, if it's 3 days or 4 days, it's so much faster than it was.
I'm seeing this over and over and over again with the teams that I work with. I have like visionary founder type people that are like, I want, and they invent a thing, right? Like I
Mhm.
need the following. And like I mean, Scott, you and I have talked like so many times we've talked about this challenge of the estimate, right? And it's like the
Mhm.
golden triangle, right? Like quality, cost, features, right?
Mhm.
And I am now seeing that the ideators cannot keep up with the ability for a well-trained engineer using AI to implement their ideas. I have like all the teams I'm working with, they are cranking out functionality that the ideators thought would be like hard, right?
Yeah.
And that maybe even a year ago would have taken the team a sprint to do something. Now it's one developer is doing that same level of effort in a day. And they can get 10 of
Yeah.
one developer can now get 10 of those scale things done, you know, in a sprint where it used to be the whole team would take a sprint to do it. And it's funny,
Pretty fascinating.
yeah, and it's funny again, like harkening back to previous episodes, right? I remember the time where you and I talked about this, where it's like, if you just get more and more efficient, then if you're using story points to measure, like, you get more and more story points done, it's just like, well, isn't it really just the case that the story points kind of scale to be bigger and bigger concepts? Like
Mhm.
it's a it's like a gas. It's gonna fill
Yeah.
the space allotted to it. Like faster we can build stuff, the more stuff people are gonna demand that we build.
This reminds me of it's kind of an old story, but I'll cut to the chase and then I'll tell a story. The estimate for everything is going to be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. So long time ago, my first engineering manager job, I worked on the front end of a website. I worked on drugstore.com, which ultimately became Walgreens.com. People were always coming to me asking me for stuff. And after I did this job for a while, this is my first engineering manager job. But after I did it for a while, I think I just started always giving the answer 2 weeks because people wouldn't come with a spec or anything. They'd just be like, how long will it take to do this thing? And I'd be like, I don't know, 2 weeks. And then finally, I give an answer 2 weeks to a woman who was a good work friend at the time. I haven't talked to her in a long time, Julie Johnston. She says, hey, every time I come in here and ask you for something, you say 2 weeks. I think you're bullshitting me. And I said, look, Julie, nothing takes a day. And nothing around here really ever takes more than a month. So if you're going to come in here with a sentence or a paragraph of what you want, 2 weeks is a good enough answer for you, right? Like it's close enough. It might take us 3 days. It might take us 17 days. I don't know.
Right.
2 weeks is good enough. And so we're approaching this world where everything's going to be 2 weeks. Literally,
Yeah.
it's going to be less than 2 weeks. It's going to be 1 week,
Well, yeah. Okay, I have two
one
riffs,
day.
two riffs off that. First riff is I remember when I was first an engineering manager, I had a mentor of mine pull me aside and he goes, whenever a developer gives you an estimate,
Mhm.
if that estimate includes the phoneme two, then it's a bullshit estimate. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, 2 weeks, 2 days, I'll have it to you tomorrow. I'll be done today. They're all bullshit.
That's good. That's good.
Well, the other thing that's funny is that I've noticed that some of the AI tools, like plan mode with cursor or plan mode with anti-gravity, sometimes the plan mode includes like if you give it a big enough thing,
It'll give
it'll
you an estimate.
it'll give you estimates. And it's so ridiculous because the estimates literally will say things like, "Oh, phase one is 1 to 2 days," and it's like, I click the fucking build button, and it's done in an hour. So it's like its estimates are so off base.
It's true. It would be nice if it estimated how long this would ordinarily take. So, well, this comes back to the SDD thing for a second, which is if the cost of developing the software is zero, the pressure is on the spec.
All the pressure should be on the spec.
Then this begs a question, which is if you've got this role in your organization called product manager, whose job is to specify the thing that the engineer builds, like how's that going to work? Are they just going to sit with the SDD bot and clarify their spec that way? Do they need the engineer even involved? Or like what's going to happen there?
I don't know if you and I talked about this already, but I feel like one of the sort of like memes that I'm starting to hear more and more of is essentially all these jobs start to morph into a job that is very close to being like a product manager, right?
Yes.
So like a product manager using a high quality, you know, lights out software factory methodology is indistinguishable from an engineer using a lights out software
Yeah.
factory
Yeah.
methodology.
That's right. Um, One of the engineering managers at our company, Tom Osowski, who I think maybe you've talked to before, that's what he's been playing with. He took essentially, we use this system called Augment, which is like Cursor to Cursor. He plugged it into Jira. He plugged it into Confluence. He plugged it into Google Drive and a bunch of other stuff, non-technical system, GitHub, of course, with our code. And he's been marveling at like what does this mean for the job lines, for the lines that we have, the roles and responsibilities? Because now I can go. He did something interesting. He said, "Look, find our company goals for this year and tell me
Yeah.
the top 5 tickets that my team should be working on."
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know if the answer was exactly right, but it was close enough. And then that's pretty interesting if the AI can do the prioritization for you.
I think, yeah, for sure. And like, how many times do you think you could sit down with like a visionary product CEO type person where, you'd have those conversations around like, oh, what do we trade off for this new feature that you just came up with that you want to build? And it's like, hey, dude, you got to prioritize this stuff. Like, someone needs to prioritize this stuff. Well, guess what? The AI probably is actually better at prioritizing a gigantic bucket of tasks than the average human is, because a human doesn't have the patience, right? Like every time you ever go to a triage or prioritization meeting, right? Like everybody burns out in the first, 20 minutes of that because humans struggle. It's so hard for humans to like look at giant lists of things and to think rationally about how to prioritize them.
Well, yes. And I mean, you just um, triggered me a little bit. Not really triggered me, but I am trying.
It's one of
This
the
is
most
this.
this is one of the most triggering things that a CTO can remember and think about is how many times they've been in prioritization meetings where the product owners or the CEO visionary is just unable to prioritize. Everything's the top priority.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I would say the trigger is actually two ways. The immediate reaction was I'm in this actually doing this bit of work right now to try and convey some priorities for this big project we're working on, and just expressing it in a succinct way so that people can digest it, but also um, with enough detail so that it's meaningful to them. I don't think I found the answer yet, but it's very difficult, right? Because we have about probably 8 or 10 work streams on this project, and each work stream is a roadmap of its own, with a year-long roadmap on each work stream. And how you end up with this huge
Yeah.
thing is if you do it in a Gantt chart, it's massive and it's just very confusing. But here's the other place. This is very cynical, and if the other people who I work with at TaskRabbit are listening, I'm making this up for entertainment purposes. I want them to know that. Um, when I used to get very worked up about those prioritization conversations earlier in my career, and now I do not at all, because I view it as like, this is great. You guys can sit here and discuss how many prize ones and prize zeros you want, but the fact is, we only have so much capacity.
Yeah.
And notwithstanding the AI conversation that we might be growing our capacity, we've only got so much capacity. So you can debate this till the cows come home, but at a certain point, there's the next project up, and you're going to have to pick what it is.
Yeah.
And so I've maybe I'm cynical, but I've just found that getting emotionally invested in that prioritization conversation is not ever proven successful to me, because, like you said, people have a hard time with it. Now, I enjoy and happy to contribute to it on like a let's think about strategically, where do we want to be investing in, and all those things. But mentally, I sort of treat it more like a Kanban board, which is like, this is great that you want to do all this stuff, but at a certain point, some team or some project is going to finish, and then we're going to choose the next one to start working on, and that's the best we can do.
Yeah.
And I guess that's my advice to all the CTOs out there, is like, don't get too worked up, because the
Yeah.
reality of this comes back to sort of what Zuckerberg says about code wins arguments. It's not exactly the same spirit of it, but at the end of the day, someone's just going to start coding, that's the point at which you have to decide the next P1.
Early in my career, I had when I was first an engineering manager, I had a mentor that effectively said something like that to me. And he was a business owner. So it was good to hear this from a business owner. It wasn't like he was an engineer that was like saying this, but he basically was like, Brad, like, just don't worry about it. The engineers work for you. Like, they're going to
That was
follow
nice of
you,
him.
they're going to follow you. So, help out,
Yeah.
collaborate, but don't get so worked up about, you know, this or that.
Well, I think the thing you said about I want to harp on that word collaborate for a second. I do think it's important to have a plan over time. I believe that a Gantt chart is the best way to express that plan. And I think that's actually really important. And I think it's important to recognize you can change that plan at any time you want. There's a cost of changing it. And if you've broken down your projects into small deliverables, the cost gets smaller and smaller. So I don't think there are people who want to go the extreme other way and say, well, we're just going to do Kanban. We're just going to pull the next ticket off the board. No, I think you have to have a plan. Businesses need to know what to expect is coming,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
But I've never been at a place where we haven't tried to plan more than we could actually do. And I used to get really wound up about that.
Well, and I
I
also
don't.
think that you might have both spent a lot of time in startups, and one of the challenges of a startup is that you don't know what you don't know, right? And so
Yeah.
you don't want to plan too far in the future because your strategic priorities are going to change.
I mean, you can't, right?
Yeah.
I'm at a more mature company now, and we can plan for the future because there's stability. But when you're earlier, it's just like you don't even know what's happening next week.
Yeah.
And you have to build it and grow it. Like, you start out hey, we're doing a 1 week sprint, and you build your capability. Well, look, we've gone way off of a year in review and off predictions. You got a final prediction for the coming year?
Let's see, prediction for the coming year. I've said it already. I'll say it again. I think we're going to see more and more of a K-shaped economy. That's what I think
Yeah.
we're going to see. I think we're going to see the haves. The haves are going to crush it, and they're going to just really perform, and the have-nots are going to fall further and further behind.
And so the interesting question for the coming year will be, if you're starting a company, it's easy to be a have.
Yes.
The question is, if you're,
Well,
let's not call it a company, if you're
well,
starting a software project.
yeah. I think it's easy to be a have if you've got the right engineering mindset.
Oh, of course. But there's no impediments to being, well, there's not a lot of impediments. But I think the interesting question in the year ahead will be, if you're an existing project or company, whatever, how do you become a have?
How do you get into the top half of that K?
Yeah.
I think we're going to see organizations that have good, strong engineering methodologies. They're going to find ways to jump up to that top half of the K, and they're going to become the haves. So even if you got legacy code base, I think we're going to see. I am very
Yeah.
bullish. I am very bullish on the software agents are going to get better and better at looking at legacy code, because they spent all
Yes.
their time looking at legacy code.
Yeah, that has to be the piece. I was looking at something similar to Spec Kit called Agent OS, and it has a feature in there. I can't remember what it's called, but where it's designed specifically for this problem. We're going to try to look at your code and try to reverse engineer rules and context from what you have. And that's a real problem. And it's actually interesting because it's a real problem that the big companies have. And so it'll be interesting to see if the Googles or Amazons and Facebooks of the world come out with some tooling to help us with that, because they've got balls of mud too.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure. For sure.
So it'll be interesting to see if they start to come out with some tooling to help us with that, because we need it very badly.
So there you go. You helped me come up with a refined prediction. One, I've been saying it, K-shaped economy, but my other prediction is you're going to see some breakout legacy companies with large legacy code bases that have provable, demonstrable top of the K performance gains.
Yeah. All right.
So there you go.
That's it. Year one has been fun, Brad.
It's been a super fun year. I'm so glad we started doing this. I love getting together with you every week and talking and picking your brain and learning from your wisdom and just sharing this time. It's been so much fun.
I feel 100% the same way. And I'm excited because we have informally, and we've not said this to anybody, to the 39 people who are listening, we have not said this. We've kind of made it a mission for ourselves to bring on more guests this year.
Yes.
And I am looking forward to that as well, to seeing, we brought on some guests in the last year, but we weren't really systematic about it, methodical about it. And now we've got our production staff.
Our producer has been just cranking out the guest invites.
So I'm looking forward to meeting some folks this year.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. All right, everybody, remember to rate, review, and subscribe.
Do you think anybody does that?
I mean, at least 5 people did.
All right. Thank you, Brad. I'll talk to you next week.
All right, talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.
This episode of How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast was edited by Saffron Hefta-Gaub. Our theme song was AI generated by Brad. Please follow us on all the social media platforms at How Many CTOs Pod. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, X, TikTok, and Patreon, or at our website at howmanyctospod.com. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Thanks for listening.